Heading into this offseason, I was hoping that Tennessee would be able to work out some sort of compromise with Malcolm Butler's contract, because cutting him would save $11 million in cap space, but it wasn't likely that he would get anywhere near that on the open market. So I thought there was some room to renegotiate his deal to be more team friendly. Obviously, they ended up releasing Butler, but in my opinion, they got a very similar caliber player at less than half the price by signing Jackrabbit Jenkins to a 2-year, $15 million contract. By most statistical metrics, Jenkins has been slightly better than Butler over the last 3 seasons. He's got a lower reception rate when targeted, a higher forced incompletion rate, more pass breakups, and more interceptions, although Jenkins has played across from Marshawn Lattimore and a more talented secondary overall. Jenkins also played in a similar defensive scheme in New Orleans, where they actually ran the most man coverage in the NFL last season, so there shouldn't be too much that he has to really learn when it comes to scheme and the sort of coverages that Tennessee likes to run. And unlike Adoree Jackson and Malcolm Butler to an extent, Jenkins has rarely missed games due to injuries, and there's obviously a lot of randomness involved in that, but you can expect him to be on the field pretty reliably. So there's definitely specific areas where Jenkins and Butler are different, but if I were to sit down and rank every cornerback in the NFL, I'd most likely have them pretty close to each other. My first immediate takeaway from watching Jenkins' film from last season is that even at 32 years old, he's still as fast and explosive as any of the best young corners in the NFL. And that's the main reason that this is not a Jonathan Joseph situation where you're signing a veteran at the end of his career, but he's just fallen off athletically to the point that he's a major weakness. Jenkins still shows everything you need athletically to be a good corner in the NFL. You see the top-end speed when he's keeping up with Tyreek Hill and Henry Ruggs down the field, and you see the explosiveness as far as breaking on short routes from off coverage. Unless this summer is the exact point where his body decides to break down, Jenkins won't be limited athletically. Athleticism will get you drafted, but it won't give you a 10-year career like Jenkins has had. It has to be paired with instincts and IQ, and we'll start by looking at the Saints' Week 1 matchup against Tampa Bay. Jenkins is playing off coverage on Justin Watson, and Watson's route isn't that great, and Tom Brady's ball placement isn't good either, but Jenkins' reaction time here is incredible. He legitimately could not have read the route any faster. Once he recognizes Watson's route, he breaks on it and shoots his eyes up to the quarterback, times the interception perfectly, and takes it back for a touchdown. On this play against Atlanta, Jenkins is going to start off showing press, but he falls back into off coverage when the ball is snapped. Jenkins is playing outside leverage with no safety help over the middle, so priority 1 mentally and physically is protecting against this deep post. And look at all of the adjustments and transitions that he makes on this play in just a few seconds. He starts out in sort of backpedal slide step combo here, giving a ton of cushion because Malcolm Jenkins is playing robber coverage and they're trying to bait Matt Ryan into throwing something quick over the middle. But once he sees that the route is still developing, his focus shifts towards regaining the position that he was giving up to start the play. So he flips his hips and starts trying to cut off Calvin Ridley's angle. And then right when he fully transitions into his bail technique, Ridley cuts his route off, and Jenkins has to flip his hips again and break on the pass. Looking at another play, this time from New Orleans' second matchup with the Bucs, Jenkins is playing the deep third in cover 3, so he's in bail technique with his eyes on the quarterback and his hips flipped inside, but he's still able to identify the out route at the exact moment it develops, flip his hips 180 degrees, and break up the pass. Another thing you can see on this play is Jenkins' ball skills, and he has really good timing as far as when to extend his arms and make a play on the ball, and his explosiveness obviously helps him here as well. A pretty significant majority of the time that Jenkins got beat, he was playing press coverage. In press, Jenkins usually prefers to wait for the receiver to make the first move before jamming, and corners will do this because it's a less aggressive way of disrupting the route without as much risk of getting beat over the top. But even though you're waiting on the receiver to declare his release, it's still important to maintain active feet, and there were a lot of times Jenkins got too sloppy with his press coverage footwork. I want to show this play as an example of why footwork is so important in press coverage. So the goal of press is to slow down a receiver's route and throw off the timing between him and the quarterback, and that's usually done with the hands, but in order to accomplish this, you have to be physically in front of the receiver, and that's where footwork becomes so crucial. Any DB coach will tell you that keeping your feet moving should be priority 1 in press coverage, because no matter how good of a punch you land, if you're not actively positioning your body in front of the receiver, he'll have no issue just running around it, and then when you inevitably have to recover, you're trying to get your feet from 0 to 100 while the receiver's already getting downfield. This rep against Calvin Ridley is an extreme example of this, where Jenkins' feet are at a complete standstill while Ridley's starting his release. So even though he lands his punch, it doesn't really matter because he has no way of staying in front of him. At this point in the play, Jenkins and Ridley are on the exact same yard line, but Ridley's accelerating out of an explosive rocker step, and Jenkins has no speed built up. The two main ways Jenkins gets beat out of press are number 1, allowing a clean release because of poor weight displacement, and number 2, not expecting the receiver to cut off his route. So a cornerback awaiting a receiver's release is arguably the most vulnerable position a football player is ever in, because only the receiver knows what route he's running, and the cornerback has to be able to accelerate in every single direction. It's pivotal in these situations for a defensive back to distribute his weight onto the balls of his feet, because it maximizes his balance and his flexibility in terms of what direction he needs to move. On this play, Scotty Miller's going to do a motor release where he takes a bunch of quick choppy steps directly at the cornerback before releasing inside. The motor release is effective because a bunch of quick steps is less threatening vertically than a couple of long strides, so the corner isn't going to prioritize maintaining that protective cushion as much, and he's just going to mirror with some quick steps of his own instead of a proper backpedal. But Miller's still moving downfield and closing the gap, so the result is that Jenkins is upright and on his heels, and especially vulnerable to getting beat deep. Here's a very similar release from Darnell Mooney, where again, the quick steps kind of trick Jenkins into leaning too far back. And then Jenkins' second issue is that if a receiver releases vertically, he pretty much locks into defending that vertical route and puts up little to no resistance when the receiver breaks inside or does a double move or something like that. This pretty much only happens out of press coverage though. There were a ton of examples, some of which I've shown, where he's able to react and flip his hips quickly out of off coverage, but Jenkins gets beat about every time this happens in press. To me, he just seems less comfortable in these situations, and he sort of gets tunnel vision once he flips his hips and starts running vertically. There are still plenty of good press coverage reps on Jenkins' tape, and the connecting factor in almost all of these is proper weight distribution. On this play, Zay Jones is going to do a similar motor release, but they're inside the 5-yard line, so that threat of getting beat deep isn't as present, and Jenkins keeps himself balanced. Even though Jones releases vertically, Jenkins has no problem defending it because he's maintained his weight distribution on the balls of his feet. Not to psychoanalyze too much, but a lot of times Jenkins seems to play with an irrational fear of getting beat downfield, which causes his technique to get sloppy. I say irrational because his makeup speed is as good as anyone. There's examples of him going step for step with guys like Tyreek Hill, DJ Moore, Scotty Miller, Mecole Hardman, Henry Ruggs, all guys of varying talent level but elite speed. Even on plays where he gets beat, I'd almost never point to a lack of speed as what was holding him back. So in my opinion, Jenkins would be way more reliable in press coverage if he'd play more aggressively in terms of footwork and hand usage. He's really good at landing his jam accurately and with good timing, and he's also pretty effective at using that jam to maintain or recover his balance. Right here, Henry Ruggs fakes an outside release and then breaks inside, and Jenkins uses an inside punch to disrupt the route, but then also to kind of propel himself back into the passing lane. And then I'm going to start showing a list of a player's strengths and weaknesses at the end of my film rooms to act as a sort of synopsis of what I noticed from their film. But overall, I think Jackrabbit Jenkins is a high-end number 2 corner. If he's your number 1 guy, you're probably looking to upgrade at the position. But as a number 2, he's exactly what you're looking for, and ideally Caleb Farley or Christian Fulton can develop into a number 1 so Jenkins can play the ideal role for him. Similar to Malcolm Butler, Jenkins is going to get beat sometime, which if your team plays a lot of man coverage, you should just expect your corners to get beat every now and then. But I think he was a really good signing who raises the floor of Tennessee's defense. If you like my videos, make sure to subscribe and follow me on Twitter, and check out my Patreon if you want to support the channel and get access to more Titans content.